You want to know when I stopped believing in happy endings? I can tell you the exact moment, the exact second. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March, and I was bleeding on my mother's kitchen floor while the man she chose over me stood there with his fists still clenched, asking me if I'd learned my lesson yet. Yeah, that's when fairy tales died for me. See, people love to talk about broken homes like there's some kind of tragedy that happens to you, like a car accident or a hurricane. Nobody wants to admit the truth. Sometimes the person who's supposed to protect you is the one holding the knife. Sometimes the monster doesn't break into your house. Sometimes your mother invites him in, makes him coffee, and lets him sleep in the bed where your father used to dream before he died in a work accident 3 years ago. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what happened. What matters is that I survived. What matters is that for every kid out there right now, hiding in their room, praying that tonight won't be the night, praying that maybe this time it'll be different, I need you to know that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that kitchen. Let me show you how everything burned down. Marcus, that's what my mother's boyfriend called himself, though I doubt that was his real name, had been living with us for 8 months. 8 months of watching my mother transform from the woman who used to read me bedtime stories into this hollow-eyed stranger who flinched every time a door closed too loud. 8 months of walking on eggshells, of keeping my grades perfect, of making myself invisible. It wasn't enough. It's never enough with men like Marcus. You know what the worst part was? Everyone could see it. My teachers saw the exhaustion in my eyes. My friends' parents saw the way I always had an excuse for why I couldn't come over anymore. The neighbors heard the shouting through the walls, but nobody did anything because Marcus was careful, because he knew exactly how to play the game. He never left marks where people could see them. He never raised his voice when anyone else was around. In public, he was the devoted boyfriend, the guy who was really stepping up to help my mom after my dad's accident. He'd put his hand on my shoulder at parent-teacher conferences and smile like he gave a damn about my future. That hand felt like a branding iron every single time. The night it all came apart started like any other nightmare. I'd gotten home late from the library, studying for finals, trying to keep my grades up because education was supposed to be my ticket out of there. My ticket to anywhere that wasn't that house, that wasn't under Marcus's thumb. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs. His truck was parked at an angle in the driveway like he'd been drinking. The living room light was on, but flickering, probably another lamp broken in another accident. Yeah, the front door was unlocked. I stood on that porch for 5 full minutes, backpack digging into my shoulders, just trying to breathe, trying to prepare myself for whatever was waiting inside. You can't prepare for hell. You just walk into it and hope you walk back out. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, that tells you something's wrong even before your brain catches up. I could hear the TV in the basement, some late-night talk show laugh track echoing up through the floorboards like mockery. Mom, my voice cracked. 16 years old, and my voice still cracked like a little kid's when I was scared. No answer. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. It had gone cold. I could see the film forming on the surface. She didn't look up when I came in, just kept staring at that coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. Mom, are you okay? You're late. Her voice was flat, dead. That's what Marcus did to her. He took the music out of her voice and replaced it with static. I told you I'd be at the library. Finals are next week, and you think you're so smart, don't you? She finally looked up, and I wished she hadn't. Her eyes were empty. You think you're better than us, better than me. Those weren't her words. I knew whose words they were. Marcus had been in her head again, twisting everything, making her see me as the enemy instead of seeing him for what he really was. Mom, I don't think that. I just want to do well in school. I want to make you proud. She laughed, actually laughed. It sounded like glass breaking. Proud. Your father thought he was so smart too. Look where that got him. Look where it got us. Dad's accident wasn't because. Don't. Her hand slammed on the table, making the cold coffee slosh over the rim. Don't you dare talk about your father. Don't you dare act like you know anything about what happened in this family. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to shake her and make her see what Marcus was doing to both of us. I wanted to ask her when she stopped being my mother and started being his puppet. Instead, I just said, "I'm going to bed." That's when I heard the stairs creak behind me. Nobody said you could leave? Marcus's voice slithered across my skin like oil. I didn't turn around, couldn't turn around. If I looked at him, if I saw that smile he always wore when he knew he had me cornered, I might have done something stupid. "I have homework," I managed to say. Homework. He drew the word out, making it sound dirty somehow. "Your mother and I have been talking. We've been talking about respect, about how a boy your age should show respect to the man of the house. Man of the house. Like he had any right to that title, like he'd earned it through anything other than fear and manipulation. I respect, you disrespect me every single day." His footsteps got closer. I could smell the whiskey on him now, could hear it in the slight slur of his words. "You walk around here with your books and your smart mouth, acting like you're too good for this family, acting like I'm not good enough for your mother." I finally turned around. Biggest mistake of my night, he was right there, close enough that I could see the burst blood vessels in his eyes, the stubble on his jaw, the way his fists were already clenched at his sides. My mother sat behind him at the table, and she wasn't looking at us anymore. She'd gone somewhere else in her head, to that place she always went when things got bad. She'd left me alone with him. "I never said that," I whispered. "You don't have to say it. I can see it in your eyes. Every time you look at me, I see your father looking back, judging me, thinking you're better than me. My father has nothing to do with..." The first hit came so fast, I didn't see it coming. His fist caught me right in the solar plexus, driving all the air out of my lungs in one massive rush. I folded over, gasping, and that's when his knee came up and caught me in the face. I heard the crack before I felt the pain. My nose, he'd broken my nose. Blood poured down my face, hot and copper tasting, and through the ringing in my ears I could hear him shouting. Something about respect, something about teaching me a lesson, something about how he was sick of my attitude, sick of the way I looked at him, sick of pretending to be patient with a punk kid who didn't appreciate what he was trying to do for this family. I tried to get up, tried to run, but he grabbed the back of my shirt and slammed me into the kitchen counter. My ribs screamed. Something gave way in my side with a wet, tearing sensation that made me want to vomit. "Marcus, please." My mother's voice, small and distant, like she was calling from another room instead of sitting right there. "Stay out of this." He didn't even look at her. "This is between me and the boy. This is about respect." Another hit. This one to my jaw. My head snapped back and I saw stars, actual stars, dancing across my vision in constellations of pain. I tasted blood, felt a tooth come loose. I was going to die. Right there in my mother's kitchen with the refrigerator humming and the TV still laughing downstairs and my mother sitting at the table drinking cold coffee. I was going to die and nobody was going to stop it. But something in me, some animal survival instinct I didn't know I had, kicked in. When Marcus pulled his fist back for another hit, I didn't try to block it. I ducked under his arm and ran, not toward the front door. He was between me and the front door. I ran for the back, through the kitchen, my ribs screaming with every breath, blood streaming down my face and soaking into my shirt. Behind me, I heard Marcus roaring, heard furniture crash, heard my mother cry out, finally. But whether she was crying out for him to stop or for me to come back, I Couldn't tell. Didn't matter. Couldn't matter. The back door was locked. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the deadbolt, and I could hear Marcus's footsteps thundering closer. Could hear him shouting about how I was going to regret this, how he was going to teach me what happens to disrespectful little shits who run from their problems. The lock clicked. The door flew open. I stumbled out into the backyard and kept running. Our neighborhood wasn't the kind of place where people looked out for each other. It was the kind of place where people minded their business, kept their heads down, and pretended they didn't hear the screaming next door. Every house I passed had lights on, had people inside watching TV or washing dishes or living their normal, safe lives. Nobody looked out their windows as a bleeding teenager ran past. I didn't have a plan, didn't have anywhere to go. My phone was in my backpack, which was still on the kitchen floor. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the blood on my face, and the terror pushing me forward. Behind me, I heard the back door slam open again. Heard Marcus still coming. He wasn't going to let me go. Men like Marcus never let you go. They chase you down because letting you escape means admitting they don't have control, and control's all they have. My broken ribs were on fire. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. My vision was blurry from the blood still pouring from my nose, and I could feel my left eye starting to swell shut. But I kept running. Past the Johnsons' house with the perfect lawn, past the Miller's place where they always had their American flag flying, past the empty lot where we used to play baseball before the city put up fences and no trespassing signs. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Had to put distance between me and that house, between me and Marcus, between me and the mother who sat at the kitchen table and did nothing while her boyfriend beat her son half to death. The rage hit me then, mixing with the fear and the pain until I couldn't tell them apart anymore. Rage at Marcus for being a monster. Rage at my mother for choosing him over me. Rage at my father for dying and leaving us vulnerable to someone like Marcus in the first place. Rage at every neighbor who heard and saw and did nothing. Rage at a world that let this happen to kids every single day and just shrugged it off as somebody else's problem. But mostly, I was filled with a rage at myself for not fighting back harder, for not being strong enough, for not being enough to make my mother choose me. The streetlights blurred together. My legs were giving out. I'd been running for I don't know how long. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been an hour. Time stops meaning anything when you're running for your life. I stumbled, caught myself on a mailbox, left a bloody handprint on the white paint. Behind me, the shouting had stopped. Either Marcus had given up or he'd gotten smart and gone to get his truck. If he got his truck, I was done. No way I could outrun a vehicle in the state I was in. I had to find help. Had to find someone, anyone, who would what? Call the cops and tell them what? That my mother's boyfriend hit me, that I ran away. They'd take me back home. They'd talk to Marcus, who would be all apologies and explanations, who would say I'd been disrespectful and he'd lost his temper, but he'd never meant to hurt me. He loved me like a son. He was just trying to teach me right from wrong. And my mother would back him up. I knew she would. She always did. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. That's what they don't tell you about being 16 and in trouble. They tell you to trust adults, to ask for help, to believe that the system will protect you. But the system is made of people, and people believe what they want to believe. They believe the adult with the steady job and the apologetic smile over the kid, with the bad attitude and the history of behavioral problems. Marcus had been building that narrative for months. Poor guy. Trying his best with a troubled teen who resented him for replacing his father. Such a difficult situation. Really admirable how he was sticking it out. I could already hear the sympathy in the social worker's voice. Already see the disappointment in the police officer's eyes when they brought me back home. Nobody was going to help me. I had to help myself. But I was so tired, so hurt, and I had nowhere to go. I'd made it to the edge of our neighborhood now, where the neat suburban houses gave way to the old commercial district that nobody used anymore. There was a gas station, one of those old ones that looked like it was stuck in 1975 with the pumps that barely worked and the convenience store that always smelled like cigarettes and desperation. The lights were on. There was a car at the pump, some ancient sedan that looked older than I was. I stumbled toward it like a drunk, like someone who'd forgotten how legs worked. My reflection in the store window stopped me cold. I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. Blood covered the entire lower half of my face, soaking into the collar of my shirt. My left eye was swollen nearly shut, already turning purple. There was a cut above my eyebrow I didn't remember getting. My lip was split and still bleeding. I looked like exactly what I was, a victim, and I hated it. God, I hated it. The bell dinged when I pushed open the door to the convenience store. The clerk, some college kid who looked bored out of his mind, glanced up from his phone, did a double take, and his eyes went wide. "Dude, are you okay? Do you need me to call?" "I'm fine." The words came out garbled through my swollen lip. "Just need to use the bathroom." "You need an ambulance, man. You're really messed up." I said I'm fine. I wasn't fine. We both knew I wasn't fine. But what was he going to do? Force me to get help I knew wouldn't actually help? He pointed toward the back with a shaking hand. "Bathroom's back there. I'm calling the cops, though. I have to." Of course he did. Of course, I made it to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. The mirror was cracked and dirty, but I could see enough to know that Marcus had done a real number on me this time, enough to know that I couldn't go back. But where could I go? I ran cold water in the sink and tried to clean up my face. The blood just kept coming. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely cup the water. Everything hurt. My ribs, my face, my heart, especially my heart. Somewhere in that house I'd just run from, my mother was probably cleaning up the blood from the kitchen floor. She was probably listening to Marcus explain how I'd pushed him too far, how he'd just lost control for a second, how he never meant for things to go that far. She was probably nodding along, believing him, choosing him. Again. I splashed more water on my face and watched it run red down the drain. I watched my future circle the drain with it. 16 years old, beaten half to death. Nowhere to go, and no one to turn to. This was rock bottom. This was as bad as it could get. I didn't know yet that I was wrong. I didn't know that sometimes when you hit rock bottom, you find out there's a basement you didn't know existed. Sometimes rock bottom has a trap door, and you're about to fall through it into something you never saw coming. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that bathroom forever. Eventually, the cops would come. Eventually, I'd have to face what happened next. I dried my face on rough brown paper towels that scraped against my torn skin, took a breath that felt like knives in my chest, looked at myself one more time in that cracked mirror. The kid looking back at me was different from the one who'd walked into the house that night. Something in his eyes had changed. Something had broken, yes, but something else had hardened too. I'd spent 16 years trying to be good enough. Good enough son, good enough student, good enough to make people choose me, protect me, love me, and where had it gotten me bleeding in a gas station bathroom with nowhere to go? Maybe being good enough wasn't the answer. Maybe survival meant becoming something else entirely. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the fluorescent lights of the convenience store. The clerk was on the phone, probably with 911, probably describing the bloody teenager who'd just stumbled in. I didn't wait to hear what he said. I walked out the door and back into the night. That's when I saw him. There he was, just sitting there on a bench outside the gas station, like he'd been waiting for me his whole life. An old man, had to be in his 70s, maybe 80s, wrinkled face, white hair, wearing clothes that looked like they'd seen better decades, faded jeans, a button-up shirt that was clean but worn, work boots that had actually seen work. He had a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hands, steam rising up into the cool night air. He looked harmless. He looked like somebody's grandfather. He looked like exactly the kind of person who couldn't help me even if he wanted to. And I almost walked right past him. Almost. But then he looked up and our eyes met, and something in his gaze stopped me cold. It wasn't pity, wasn't shock, wasn't any of the things I expected to see when someone looked at my destroyed face. It was recognition, like he'd seen this before, like he knew exactly what had happened to me just by looking. "Son," he said, and his voice was quiet, but it carried weight somehow. "You need to sit down before you fall down." I wanted to tell him I was fine. Wanted to keep walking, keep running, keep moving until I'd put enough distance between me and that house that maybe the pain would stop chasing me. But my legs had other ideas. They just gave out. I didn't fall. The old man moved faster than someone his age should have been able to move. He was up off that bench and catching me before I hit the pavement, guiding me down to sit where he'd been sitting. Easy there. Easy. His hands were steady, strong. Not the shaky, weak hands I expected from someone his age. "You're safe now. Whatever you're running from, you're safe right here." And that's when I broke. I don't know if it was his voice or his hands or just the fact that someone, anyone, had said I was safe. But 16 years of holding everything together just shattered. I started crying, big ugly sobs that made my broken ribs scream and my split lip bleed again, and I couldn't stop. I cried for my mother who chose a monster over her son. I cried for my father who died and left us vulnerable. I cried for the kid I used to be, the one who believed adults would protect him. I cried because I was terrified and hurt and alone, and I didn't know what to do next. And the old man just sat there beside me. Didn't tell me to calm down, didn't tell me it would be okay, didn't give me any of that useless comfort that people offer when they don't actually know how to help. He just let me break, and somehow that helped more than any words could have. When I finally ran out of tears, even the sobs turned to hiccups and then to shaky breathing, he handed me a napkin from his pocket. "Clean yourself up best you can," he said. "Then you're going to tell me what happened." Not asking, telling, like he had the authority to demand answers from me. I should have been annoyed. Should have told him to mind his own business, but there was something in his tone, something that made me want to tell him everything, something that made me believe he might actually listen. So I did. I told him everything. About my dad dying 3 years ago in a work accident, about Marcus moving in 8 months ago, about how he'd slowly taken over our house, our lives, my mother's mind, about the escalation, how it started with words, then throwing things. Then, the first time he grabbed me, about how my mother stopped seeing it, stopped protecting me, stopped being my mother, about tonight, about the attack in the kitchen, about running, about having nowhere to go. The old man listened to all of it without interrupting, just sat there sipping his coffee occasionally, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother," he finally said. "She's still in that house?" "Yeah." "And this Marcus? He a big guy? Strong?" "Yeah." "Why?" The old man smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might give before it struck. Just getting the picture straight in my head. He stood up slowly, like his joints hurt, and I felt a pang of guilt for dumping all this on some random old guy who probably just wanted to drink his coffee in peace. "You got anywhere to go tonight? Any family, friends?" I shook my head. All right then. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me. I'm going to get you cleaned up proper, get some ice on that face, and we're going to figure out your next move. Sound good?" "I don't even know you." "Name's Frank. Frank Morrison." He held out his hand, and after a second, I shook it. His grip was firm. "Sure. And you are?" "Jason? Jason Chen?" "Well, Jason Chen, you've had about the worst night a kid can have. But that changes now. You understand me? From this moment on, things are different." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him, but I'd learned not to trust promises from adults. Why are you helping me? The question came out harsher than I meant it to. You don't know me. This isn't your problem. Frank looked at me with those sharp eyes that didn't match his elderly appearance. Son, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. Men who put their hands on kids, on anyone weaker than them, they're cowards. Every single one of them. And I've spent my entire life making sure cowards face consequences for their actions. He paused. This Marcus, he just made a very big mistake, because now it's not just your problem, now it's mine too. Something in his voice sent a chill down my spine. Not fear, at least not fear of him, but there was steel there, authority, the kind of tone that made you stand up straighter without even thinking about it. I don't understand. You will. Come on. He started walking toward the old sedan I'd seen at the pump. We've got work to do. I should have asked more questions. Should have demanded to know what he meant, who he was, why he was so confident he could help me when nobody else could or would. But I was tired, hurt, and I had nowhere else to go. So I followed him to the car. The inside of Frank's sedan was immaculate. Not just clean, organized with military precision. Everything had its place. There was a first aid kit in the glove compartment, a blanket folded perfectly in the back seat. Even the cup holders were spotless. This wasn't the car of some random old man. This was the car of someone who planned for contingencies, someone who lived by discipline and order. Frank drove carefully, never speeding, signaling every turn. We left the gas station behind, drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, and every minute that passed, I expected him to ask more questions, to press for details, to demand something from me. He didn't. Just drove in silence, occasionally glancing over like he was checking to make sure I was still conscious. We pulled up to a small house in an older part of town, the kind of neighborhood where people had lived in the same houses for 40, 50 years. Everything was neat, well-maintained, but modest. Frank's house looked like it belonged to someone who didn't need to impress anyone but took pride in what they had. "Come on in," he said, unlocking the front door. "Let's get you patched up." And the inside of the house matched the outside, clean, organized. But what caught my attention were the photos on the walls. Military photos. Dozens of them. Frank in uniform, looking decades younger, but with those same sharp eyes. Frank with other soldiers. Frank shaking hands with people in suits. Frank standing in front of flags and buildings I recognized from history books. "You were in the military?" I said stupidly. 42 years. Frank was in the kitchen now, pulling out that first aid kit, setting supplies on the counter with practiced efficiency. Army. Started as a private, ended as, well, we'll get to that. He motioned for me to sit at his kitchen table, then came over with supplies. His hands were gentle as he started cleaning the blood off my face, but his movements were professional, clinical, like he'd done this before, many times. "This is going to sting," he warned before applying antiseptic to the cut above my eyebrow. He wasn't lying. I hissed through my teeth, gripping the edge of the table. "Breathe through it. You've handled worse tonight." He kept working, cleaning wounds, checking my nose. Not broken, just badly bruised. Examining my ribs with careful pressure that still made me want to scream. "Ribs are cracked, maybe fractured. You need an x-ray, but that can wait until morning. Right now, we're going to ice everything, get some food in you, and then you're going to sleep." "I can't sleep. Marcus might." "Marcus isn't going to do anything." Frank's voice was flat. Final. "Trust me on that." "How can you possibly know that?" Frank sat back, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Jason, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Do you trust me?" Did I? I'd known him for less than an hour. He was a stranger. For all I knew, this could be going from one bad situation into another, but those photos on the wall, the way he moved, the absolute certainty in his voice, the fact that he'd actually listened to me, actually helped me, actually seemed to give a damn. I think so, I said honestly. Good, because what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I need you to believe me. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. I wasn't just in the military, son. I spent the last 20 years of my career in military intelligence. I retired 5 years ago with the rank of lieutenant colonel. Before that, I did 2 tours as a military investigator, handling cases involving domestic violence, assault, abuse of power. I stared at him. My brain couldn't process what he was saying. This old man sitting across from me, this guy who looked like he should be fishing or playing golf or watching game shows, he was a lieutenant colonel. He was military intelligence. I don't understand. You don't have to understand yet. What you need to know is this. I have resources, I have contacts, I have experience dealing with men like Marcus, and I have the knowledge and authority to make sure he faces consequences for what he did to you. Frank's expression hardened. I also have absolutely zero tolerance for men who abuse children. Zero. And I've spent my entire adult life making sure men like that don't get away with it. My hands started shaking again. But I'm nobody. I'm just some kid you're a minor who was assaulted by an adult in a position of trust. That makes you exactly the kind of person I spent my career protecting. He stood up, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a card. Handed it to me. It was his military ID. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, U.S. Army, retired. The photo was a few years old, but it was definitely him. Oh my God, I whispered. I'm going to make a few phone calls, Frank said, taking the ID back and replacing it in the drawer. While I do that, you're going to eat something. There's leftover soup in the fridge, heat it up, and then you're going to take a shower and get some rest. In the morning, we're going to start building a case against Marcus that he won't be able to weasel out of. A case? Evidence, documentation, witness statements. Everything we need to make sure he's prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Frank pulled out his phone, started scrolling through contacts. I still know people, Jason, prosecutors, judges, police chiefs, people who owe me favors, people who will listen when I tell them there's a kid who needs protection and a man who needs to be behind bars. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Random old men didn't turn out to be former military intelligence officers who just happened to specialize in exactly the kind of help I needed. Why? The word came out broken. Why are you doing this? Frank looked up from his phone, and for the first time since I'd met him, his expression softened. You want the truth? I had a daughter once. Emily. Smartest, kindest girl you ever met. His voice went quiet. When she was 17, her boyfriend started getting rough with her. Nothing too bad at first, just grabbing her arm too hard, pushing her around a little. She didn't tell me because she thought she could handle it, thought it would get better. I already knew where this story was going, could feel the tragedy coming like a train. It didn't get better, Frank continued. It got worse. By the time she finally told me, by the time I finally saw what was happening, she was already convinced she couldn't leave him, that it was somehow her fault, that nobody would believe her. He paused, his jaw tight. I was in the middle of a deployment. Couldn't get home for another 3 weeks. I told her to stay with her mother, to keep away from him, that I'd handle it when I got back. What happened? He killed her. 3 days before I was supposed to come home, he beat her to death in his apartment. Then he called the police and said she'd attacked him, that he'd been defending himself. Frank's hands clenched into fists. They believed him at first. A 17-year-old girl against a 23-year-old man, and they believed him. I'm so sorry. I got home to bury my daughter, and then I spent the next 6 months building an airtight case against that son of a bitch. Used every contact I had, every skill I'd learned in the military, every single resource available to me, and I made sure he went to prison for the rest of his miserable life. Frank looked at me, and his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. I couldn't save Emily. I was too far away, too late, too slow to see the signs. But I swore on her grave that I would never let another kid suffer like she did if I had the power to stop it. So when I saw you stumble out of that gas station covered in blood, terrified and alone, I saw my daughter. I saw every kid who's ever been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect them, and I made a choice. What choice? To do what I couldn't do for Emily, to make sure you don't become another statistic, another tragic story that people hear about and then forget. He straightened up, and suddenly he didn't look like a frail old man anymore. He looked like exactly what he was, a trained military officer with decades of experience and absolutely nothing to lose. Marcus made a mistake tonight, Jason. He thought he could beat you down, and that would be the end of it. He thought you'd go crawling back home, that your mother would cover for him, that nobody would care about one more kid with bruises. Frank's smile came back, that shark smile that made my spine tingle. But he didn't count on you finding me. He didn't count on me having spent 42 years learning exactly how to take down men like him. And he sure as hell didn't count on the fact that I've got nothing better to do with my retirement than make sure cowards face justice. I felt something shift in my chest, something that had been crushed and broken starting to unfurl again. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something close. What do we do? I asked. First, you eat and rest. You're no good to anyone if you pass out from exhaustion and pain. Frank started toward his hallway. Guest room's the second door on the left. Bathroom's next to it. Take as long as you need in the shower. The hot water should help with those ribs. And then tomorrow morning, we go to war. He paused at the doorway, looking back at me. But this isn't the kind of war that's fought with fists, son. This is the kind of war fought with evidence, documentation, and the full weight of the legal system. And unlike Marcus, we're going to do everything by the book. Because when we're done, there won't be any question of guilt. There won't be any loopholes for him to slip through. He's going to face exactly what he deserves. I stood up slowly, my body protesting every movement. What if my mom doesn't cooperate? What if she backs his story? Frank's expression darkened. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but Jason, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your mother might choose him over you. I've seen it before. People in abusive relationships, they get their thinking twisted. They defend their abusers because admitting the truth means admitting they made a mistake, that they put themselves and their children in danger. The words hurt worse than my cracked ribs. But here's what I learned from watching cases like this for 20 years, Frank continued. Sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes, when confronted with undeniable evidence, when forced to see the truth they've been hiding from, they wake up. They remember who they used to be. They choose their kids. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't. But you'll survive, you'll have a future, and someday maybe she'll realize what she lost and who she chose to lose it for. His voice gentled, but that's her choice to make. Your choice right now is to survive, to heal, and to make sure Marcus pays for what he did. Can you do that? Could I? 24 hours ago, I would have said no. I would have said I was just a kid, powerless against an adult, against a system that seemed designed to protect people like Marcus. But standing in Frank Morrison's kitchen, looking at the photos of a man who'd spent his entire life fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. I felt like maybe I wasn't alone anymore. Yeah, I said, I can do that. Good man. Frank nodded approvingly. Now go shower and rest. We've got a long day ahead of us tomorrow. I made my way to the guest room, moving slowly because everything hurt. The room was simple, a bed with military crisp corners, a dresser, a window with clean curtains. There were folded clothes on the bed, sweatpants and a t-shirt that would probably be too big for me, but were clean and soft. The shower was exactly what I needed. The hot water stung every cut and scrape, but it also washed away the blood and the stink of fear sweat and the feeling of Marcus's hands on me. I stood under the spray, until the water started running clear, until I felt almost human again. When I got out and looked in the mirror, I looked like I'd been in a fight. Both eyes were blackened now, my lip was swollen, there were bruises blooming across my jaw and cheekbone. But I was clean, and I was safe. For now, at least. I put on the clothes Frank had left. They were definitely too big, but they were comfortable, and made my way back to the kitchen. The soup he'd mentioned was heating on the stove, and I could hear him in another room talking on the phone in a low voice. Yes, I understand the protocol, but this is time sensitive. The kid's got bruises all over him, cracked ribs, facial trauma, classic signs of assault. No, he won't go back to that house tonight. He's staying with me. Because I'm calling in that favor you owe me from the Henderson case, that's why. I stood in the doorway, listening. Frank's tone was completely different now, authoritative, commanding, the voice of someone who was used to giving orders and having them followed. I need a forensic photographer first thing in the morning. Every bruise documented with timestamps. And I need you to put a priority flag on this case. The perpetrator's name is Marcus. He paused. Hold on. Frank appeared in the doorway, saw me standing there. What's Marcus's last name? Williams, Marcus Williams. Frank repeated it into the phone. Marcus Williams. Run him through the system, see if he's got any priors. Also check for restraining orders, domestic violence complaints, anything that shows a pattern. Yeah, I'll owe you for this one. No, trust me, this is the kind of case that makes careers. Open and shut once we get all the evidence documented. All right, 7 a.m. sharp, I'll have the kid ready. He hung up, looked at me, standing there with probably the most shocked expression on my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. You're actually doing it, I said. You're really going to help me. I told you I would. Frank walked past me to check on the soup. Sit down, eat, then sleep. Tomorrow's when the real work begins. I sat at his kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had been hitting me just a few hours ago, except this was a different kitchen, a different table, a different world entirely. Frank ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of me with a glass of water and 2 pills. Ibuprofen for the pain and swelling. The soup was good. Homemade chicken noodle, the kind my mom used to make before everything went wrong. I ate slowly because my jaw hurt and because every swallow reminded me of the tooth I'd felt come loose. Frank sat across from me, making notes on a legal pad. Lists, timelines, questions to ask, evidence to gather. He worked with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. What was that phone call? I asked between spoonfuls of soup. Detective I used to work with, good man, owes me a favor from a case I helped him crack a few years back. Frank didn't look up from his notes. He's going to fast-track your case. Make sure it gets the attention it deserves instead of being buried under a pile of paperwork. And the photographer? We need professional documentation of your injuries. Photos that will hold up in court with timestamps and proper chain of custody. Can't rely on cell phone pictures for something this important. Court. The words sent a chill through me. I'd have to testify, wouldn't I, against Marcus? Probably, but we're going to build such an overwhelming case that he might take a plea deal rather than risk trial. Frank finally looked up. Either way, you won't be alone in that courtroom. I'll be right there with you. Why are you so sure this will work? What if he... Jason. Frank's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. I need you to understand something. Men like Marcus, they get away with abuse because it happens in private, because victims are scared to come forward, because there's no evidence beyond one person's word against another's. But you got out. You have visible injuries, and now you have me, someone with 42 years of experience in investigations and a Rolodex full of people who know I don't waste their time with bullshit cases. He leaned back in his chair. Marcus thinks he's untouchable. He thinks your mother will protect him, that you'll be too scared to do anything, that the system won't care about one more domestic violence case. But he's wrong on all counts, because this isn't just another case. This is personal for me. And when I make something personal, I don't lose. The certainty in his voice should have seemed like arrogance, should have seemed like an old man overestimating his abilities, but it didn't. Because everything he'd said so far, he'd backed up. Every promise he'd made, he'd kept. I finished my soup in silence, and Frank finished his notes. When I was done, he took my bowl to the sink and washed it with the same precise movements he did everything else. "Bed?" he said. "We've got an early morning." I made my way back to the guest room, climbed into the bed with the military corners, and lay there staring at the ceiling. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing. 12 hours ago, I'd been studying for finals in the library, worried about my grades, about college applications, about all the normal things 16-year-old kids worry about. Now I was lying in a stranger's guest room with a face that looked like hamburger meat, planning to testify against my mother's boyfriend with the help of a retired Army lieutenant colonel who'd apparently decided to make me his personal mission. It was insane. All of it was insane. But maybe that's what hope felt like after you'd given up on it. Maybe it felt impossible and terrifying and too good to be true. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 8 months, I fell asleep without being afraid of what morning would bring. I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon, which was disorienting as hell because for a second I forgot where I was. Then I tried to sit up and my ribs reminded me of everything: the kitchen, Marcus, the running, Frank. I shuffled out to the kitchen to find him already dressed, already organized, already 3 steps ahead, like he'd been awake for hours. Probably had been. Military guys never really lost that early rising habit. I'd learned. "Morning," he said, sliding a plate across the table to me. "Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. Eat up. We've got a full day ahead of us." "What time is it?" 6:30. "Photographer's coming at 7, detective at 7:30, and we have an appointment with a lawyer at 9. He said it like he was reading off a grocery list, like orchestrating my entire legal defense was just another Tuesday for him. Maybe it was. I ate because my body needed fuel, even though every chew sent pain shooting through my jaw. Frank sat across from me with his coffee and a notebook, still making lists, still planning. "How are you feeling?" he asked without looking up, like I got hit by a truck. "Good. That's going to photograph well." He said it clinically without malice. The worse you look, the harder it is for Marcus to claim this was anything less than brutal assault. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. Frank checked his watch, probably approving of the punctuality, and went to answer it. The photographer was a woman in her 40s named Sarah Chen. No relation, apparently, though she gave me a small smile when she heard my last name. She was professional, efficient, and completely unfazed by my battered face. "I've been doing forensic photography for 12 years, she said, setting up her equipment in Frank's living room. "I've seen worse, but this is still pretty bad, kid." "Thanks, I think." She spent the next hour photographing every visible injury from multiple angles. My face from the front, both sides, from above. My torso, where the bruises from Marcus's fists were already turning purple and yellow. My ribs, where you could see the swelling. Even my hands, which had cuts and scrapes from when I'd tried to defend myself. Every click of the camera felt like documentation, like proof, like my pain becoming evidence instead of just my word against his. Frank stood in the corner watching, occasionally making notes. When Sarah was done, she reviewed the images on her laptop, nodding with satisfaction. "These are good, clear, well lit, timestamps are all accurate. I'll have the full report to you by this afternoon, Frank." "Appreciate it, Sarah. Anytime, especially for cases like this." She started packing up her equipment and then paused and looked at me. "I don't know what happened to you, Jason, but you did the right thing getting help. A lot of kids don't. A lot of kids think they have to handle it alone. They end up as coroner's photos instead of evidence photos." The words hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. If I hadn't run, if I'd gone back home, tried to tough it out, tried to wait until I was 18, I could have ended up like Frank's daughter. Just another tragic story. Thank you, I managed to say. She gave me a real smile this time. You've got a good advocate in Frank. He's one of the best. You're going to be okay. After she left, Frank made me drink more water and take more ibuprofen. Detective Ramirez will be here soon. He's going to want your full statement. Tell him everything you told me. Don't leave anything out. Don't minimize anything. Every detail matters. What if I can't remember everything? Then you say you can't remember. Never guess. Never fill in gaps with what you think happened, only facts you're sure of. Frank's eyes were serious. In court, if you ever have to testify, the defense will try to catch you in inconsistencies. So establish the truth now while it's fresh and stick to it. Detective Ramirez showed up at 7:30 on the dot. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and an easy manner that probably put witnesses at ease. But when he shook Frank's hand, there was clear respect there. Colonel Morrison, been a while. Too long, Miguel. Thanks for making this a priority. When you call, I listen. You've never steered me wrong before. Ramirez turned to me and his expression softened. Jason, right? I'm Detective Ramirez. I'm going to ask you some questions about what happened last night. Some of them might be difficult, but I need you to be as honest and detailed as possible. Okay. I nodded. We sat at Frank's kitchen table, which was rapidly becoming the center of operations, and I told my story for the third time. But this time, Ramirez was recording it, taking notes, asking follow-up questions. When did the abuse start? How often did it happen? Did anyone else ever witness it? Did I have any other injuries from previous incidents? Had I ever reported it before? Why not? That last question stung because the answer was shame, fear, hope that it would get better. All the reasons victims never report. Ramirez didn't judge, just wrote it all down. I ran Marcus Williams through the system, he said, flipping through his notes. He's got a record, nothing violent on paper, but a string of charges that got pleaded down. Disturbing the peace, destruction of property, violation of a restraining order that his ex-girlfriend took out against him 3 years ago. My blood ran cold. He hurt someone before me? According to the report from the ex-girlfriend, yes. She claimed he was physically abusive, but she dropped the charges before it went to trial, and the restraining order expired after a year. Ramirez's jaw tightened. Classic pattern? These guys move from victim to victim, and the system keeps giving them second chances. Not this time, Frank said quietly. Not this time, Ramirez agreed. He looked at me. Jason, I'm going to be straight with you. This is going to be hard. We'll need to interview your mother. We'll need to go to the house, document the scene. Marcus will be arrested, but he might make bail. You're going to need somewhere safe to stay during the investigation and trial. He can stay here, Frank said immediately. I've got the space, and I'm already approved as an emergency foster placement. Did it years ago after Emily died. Thought I might help other kids. Never used it until now. I stared at him. He'd been prepared for this, had the certification ready, like he'd been waiting all these years for someone to need him. You'd do that? Already told you I would. I don't say things I don't mean. Ramirez made a note. That'll make the paperwork easier. I'll contact CPS and get emergency custody transferred to you by end of day, Frank. Given the circumstances and your credentials, it should be straightforward. How fast can we move on Marcus? Frank asked. I'm going to pick him up for questioning this afternoon. I want to get Jason's mother's statement first, while Marcus doesn't know we're investigating. Ramirez stood. Can you be ready to come to the station around 10? I want you there when we interview your mother, Jason. In a separate room, but available if we need you. The thought of seeing my mother, of having to face her while she either backed Marcus or admitted what he'd done, made me want to vomit, but Frank put a hand on my shoulder. You won't be alone. I'll be right there with you. And somehow, That made it bearable. The lawyer Frank had found was named Patricia Huang, and she had the kind of reputation that made prosecutors nervous. She met us at her office at 9, took one look at my face, and her expression went from professional to furious in about 2 seconds. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Again, every time I told the story, it got a little easier and a little harder at the same time. Easier because the words came more naturally. Harder because I had to relive it over and over. Patricia listened, taking notes on her tablet, occasionally stopping me to ask for clarification. When I finished, she sat back and looked at Frank. "You weren't kidding. This is open and shut." I never kid about cases involving kids. "What's the play?" Patricia asked. "Full prosecution, assault and battery on a minor, child endangerment, any other charges Ramirez can make stick. I want Marcus to see the inside of a prison cell, and I want to make sure he never has access to another child again." Patricia nodded. "I can work with that. Jason, I'm going to be representing you in any legal proceedings. That means I work for you, not the state, not Frank, you. My job is to protect your interests and make sure your voice is heard. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now, here's what's going to happen. The state will prosecute Marcus criminally. That's the case that could put him in prison. But we're also going to file a civil suit against him for damages, medical expenses, emotional trauma, lost quality of life. Even if your mother tries to defend him in the criminal case, the civil case gives us another avenue to make sure he faces consequences. What about my mom?" The question came out small, scared. Patricia's expression gentled. "That's complicated. If she was aware of the abuse and didn't protect you, there could be legal consequences for her, too. Failure to protect a minor is a crime in this state, but a lot depends on her level of awareness and whether she was also a victim of abuse herself." She was. I hated admitting it, hated that even now, after everything, I still wanted to protect her. Marcus hit her, too. Not as much, but I saw bruises. Then she's a victim too, and victims of domestic abuse often have their judgment impaired by fear and trauma. Patricia made a note. The DA will likely give her immunity in exchange for testimony against Marcus. She'll probably face mandated counseling and parenting classes, but no criminal charges if she cooperates fully. That was the answer I needed. My mother wouldn't go to jail. She'd get help instead. Right now, focus is on Marcus and making sure you're safe. Patricia continued. By the time we left Patricia's office, I felt like I'd been through a ringer. But I also felt something else. Prepared. Like I had armor now. Like I wasn't just a scared kid anymore, but someone with a team, with people who knew what they were doing and were ready to fight for me. The police station was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, the smell of burnt coffee, and bureaucracy. Ramirez met us in the lobby and led us to a small room with a window that looked into an interview room. "Your mother's on her way?" he said. We told her we needed to ask her some questions about an incident last night. She doesn't know you're here." I felt sick. Through the window, I watched 2 uniformed officers lead my mother into the interview room. She looked terrible. Eyes red from crying, hair uncombed, wearing the same clothes she'd had on last night. She looked scared. Part of me thought, good, she should be scared, but another part, the part that remembered her reading me bedtime stories, remembered her before Marcus destroyed her, just felt sad. Ramirez sat down across from her, and another detective, a woman named Torres, sat beside him. They started with easy questions: her name, her address, her relationship to Marcus. Then, "Ms. Chen, can you tell us about last night? Specifically about any incident involving your son, Jason?" My mother's face crumpled. "Is he okay? Is Jason okay? He ran out and I couldn't find him. And Marcus said he probably just needed to cool off, but I've been so worried. Jason is safe." Torres said gently. But we need to know what happened. And my mother told them. Not the sanitized version I expected, not the story that protected Marcus. She told them the truth. She told them about the fight, about Marcus hitting me, about the blood on the kitchen floor. She told them she'd been too scared to stop it, too frozen to move. She told them it wasn't the first time Marcus had hurt me, that it had been getting worse for months, and she didn't know what to do. She told them she was sorry. Over and over, she said she was sorry. I watched her break down completely, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, and I felt something complicated. Anger, yes, but also understanding. She'd been trapped too, in her own way. That's good, Frank said quietly beside me. She's cooperating. That makes everything easier. Ramirez asked more questions about Marcus's history, about previous incidents, about whether she'd be willing to testify against him, and my mother said yes to all of it. Yes, she'd testify. Yes, she'd support prosecution. Yes, she wanted Marcus out of the house, out of our lives. We're offering you immunity from prosecution in exchange for your full cooperation and testimony, Torres said. You'll be required to complete a domestic violence recovery program and parenting classes. Do you understand? Yes, I'll do whatever you need. I just want my son back. Too little, too late, but something. We're going to pick Marcus up now, Ramirez said after my mother's interview was done. Do you want to see your mother first, Jason? Did I? I looked through that window at the woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, loved me, and then failed to protect me when I needed it most. Not yet, I said. I'm not ready. Ramirez nodded like he understood. Fair enough. We'll make sure she knows you're safe. Take your time. Frank drove me back to his house in silence. I was wrung out, emotionally exhausted, but there was also a weird sense of relief. My mother had told the truth. She'd chosen me, even if it was late. You okay? Frank asked as we pulled into his driveway. I don't know. I thought I'd be angrier or more relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Trauma doesn't have an easy resolution. Getting justice doesn't magically fix what was broken. Frank turned off the car but didn't get out yet. But it's a start, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. My phone, which Frank had retrieved from my backpack at some point, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Detective Ramirez. Marcus Williams has been arrested and charged with assault and battery on a minor, child endangerment, and violation of a previous restraining order condition. He's being held without bail pending arraignment. You're safe. I showed Frank the text. He read it and nodded with satisfaction. Good. That's the first domino. Now the rest will fall. And they did. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's entire life collapsed like a house of cards. The arraignment happened 3 days after his arrest. Patricia represented my interests as the victim, and the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Daniels, who Frank apparently also knew from way back, came loaded. For bear, she presented the photographs, the medical reports, my testimony, my mother's testimony, the history of Marcus's previous restraining order, and his pattern of violence. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that it was a one-time loss of control, that Marcus had been provoked, that he'd never meant to hurt me so badly. He tried to paint Marcus as the real victim, a man trying to discipline an unruly stepson who got out of hand. The judge wasn't having it. Mr. Williams will remain in custody without bail. This court finds substantial risk of flight and danger to the victim. Trial date is set for 6 weeks from today. Marcus finally looked at me then, tried to stare me down, tried to make me look away like he always had. I didn't look away, just stared back until he was the one who dropped his eyes. Frank leaned over and whispered, "That's my boy." But the trial never happened because 2 weeks after the arraignment, Marcus's lawyer came to Patricia with a plea deal. Marcus would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence recommendation of 8 years with possibility of parole after 5. He would also agree to a permanent restraining order against me and my mother, surrender any parental rights or claims, not that he had any, and register as a violent offender. It's less than he deserves, Patricia told me and Frank in her office. But it's a guaranteed conviction. If we go to trial, there's always a risk, however small, that a jury might be sympathetic to him. This way, we know he's going to prison. What do you think? I asked Frank. He considered it carefully. I think 8 years is light for what he did, but I also think guaranteed justice is better than rolling the dice on a jury, and 5 years minimum means you'll be 21 before he's even eligible for parole. You'll be an adult with your own life beyond his reach. I thought about it, about the idea of testifying at trial, of having to face Marcus in court for days, of reliving everything in front of strangers, about the uncertainty of letting 12 random people decide if what happened to me was really that bad. Take the deal, I said. Marcus pleaded guilty 3 weeks later. I was there in the courtroom when he did it, sitting between Frank and my mother. Marcus wouldn't look at me, wouldn't even turn his head in my direction, cowered to the end. Judge Patterson accepted the plea and sentenced him on the spot. 8 years in state prison. Eligible for parole after 5. Permanent restraining order, registration as a violent offender. Mr. Williams, Judge Patterson said, looking down at Marcus with open contempt, you abused a position of trust to brutalize a child. You are the worst kind of predator, one who targets those who cannot defend themselves. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the pain you've caused and the life you've destroyed. If I had my way, you'd never see the outside of a cell again. But the law has limits, so I will content myself with ensuring that within those limits you face the full consequences of your actions. He banged his gavel. 8 years, take him away. And just like that, it was over. Marcus was led out in handcuffs, and I felt something shift. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction, just closure. We walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine. My mother was crying quietly, and I still didn't know how to feel about her. She'd chosen me in the end, but she'd failed me for so long before that. I'm sorry, she said for the 1,000th time. Jason, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was. I should have... Yeah, I said, you should have. She flinched like I'd hit her. But you didn't, I continued. And I have to figure out how to live with that. We both do. Can you forgive me? I don't know. Maybe someday, but not today. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'll wait, however long it takes. I'm in counseling now. The court-mandated program. I'm trying to understand what happened, why I let him control me like that. That's good, Mom. That's a start. It was the first time I'd called her Mom in weeks. Her eyes widened and fresh tears spilled over. Frank put a hand on my shoulder. Come on, son, let's go home. Home? He'd called his house home. And the weird thing was, it felt like home, more than my mother's house ever had. The CPS paperwork had come through a week after Marcus's arrest. Frank was now officially my legal guardian until I turned 18. My mother had agreed without contest, said she needed to work on herself before she could be a mother to me again. Life didn't magically get better after Marcus went to prison. I wish I could tell you it did. I wish I could say justice healed all my wounds and everything was perfect. It didn't work that way. I had nightmares for months. I had anxiety attacks. I had days where I couldn't get out of bed because the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. But Frank was there every single time. He got me into therapy with a specialist who dealt with trauma. He made sure I kept up with school. Even reached out to my teachers to explain the situation. Turns out, my English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, and my guidance counselor, Mr. Kim, had suspected something was wrong for months. They testified as character witnesses, said they'd seen the change in me after Marcus moved in, wished they'd pushed harder to investigate. Frank taught me how to defend myself, not just physically, but emotionally, legally, in every way that mattered. He became the father my actual father would have wanted to be, the protector my mother should have been. My mother tried. I'll give her credit for that. She completed her court-mandated program, started rebuilding her life without Marcus. She got a better job, moved to a smaller apartment, started paying down the debt Marcus had accumulated in her name, and slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed it happening, I started to forgive her. Not forget, never forget, but forgive. We had lunch once a month. She never pushed for more, never demanded I move back in with her or pretend things were like they used to be. She accepted what I was willing to give and seemed grateful for even that small connection. "She's trying," Frank said one day after I'd come back from one of our lunches. "That's all any of us can do. Try, fail, get up, try again. Is it enough? That's not for me to answer. Only you can decide if someone's efforts are enough." I graduated high school with honors, got into a good college with a scholarship. Frank came to my graduation, sat in the front row, cheered louder than anyone when I walked across that stage. My mother came too, sat in the back. Didn't try to take credit, didn't try to insert herself into the celebration, just smiled with tears in her eyes when I accepted my diploma. That night at Frank's house, we had cake and ice cream, just the two of us. "I'm proud of you," Frank said. "You survived something that would have destroyed most people. And you didn't just survive, you thrived. You're going to do great things, Jason. I couldn't have done it without you? Sure, you could have. You're stronger than you think." He paused. "But you didn't have to do it alone. That's the important part. Everyone needs someone in their corner. You were lucky enough to stumble into a gas station parking lot at the exact right moment." "You really think that was luck? You just happened to be sitting there?" Frank smiled slightly. "I've been sitting on that bench most nights for 5 years. Since I retired, something to do, place to think. I suppose you could call it luck. I call it being ready when needed." So, it wasn't pure coincidence. Frank had been there, waiting for years, waiting for someone who needed him. "Do you know what you want to do with your life?" Frank asked. I'd been thinking about that a lot lately, about majors and careers and futures. "I want to help kids like me," I said, "kids who are trapped, who think there's no way out. I want to be the person who shows them there is." Frank smiled. "Then that's what you'll do, and you'll be damn good at it." 3 years later, I was studying social work in college. I volunteered at shelters for abused kids. I mentored teenagers in foster care. I became the person I'd needed when I was 16. Frank came to visit me at school sometimes, took me out for dinner, listened to my stories about classes and cases and all the ways the system was broken and needed fixing. "You're tilting at windmills," he said once, amused. "You spent 42 years tilting at windmills." Fair point. When I was 21, Marcus became eligible for parole. I wrote a victim impact statement opposing it. So did my mother. The parole board denied him. He'd gotten into multiple fights in prison, had disciplinary violations, showed no remorse or completion of anger management programs. 2 years later, when he was up for parole again, I got a different kind of notification. Marcus Williams had died in prison, fight with another inmate over something stupid. He'd been 43 years old. I was at Frank's house, helping him organize his garage when I got the call from the victim services coordinator. "How do you feel?" Frank asked after I hung up. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel relieved or vindicated or something, but I just feel nothing." "That's healthy, actually. He stopped mattering to your life a long time ago. His death doesn't change anything for you. You've already moved on." And Frank was right. Marcus's death was just a footnote, a period at the end of a sentence I'd already moved past. What mattered was what I'd built after him, the life I'd created, the person I'd become. I finished my degree, got hired by a nonprofit that worked with abused and neglected kids. I was good at my job because I understood. I'd been there. I knew what it felt like to be alone and scared and convinced nobody cared. And I made sure the kids I worked with knew they weren't alone, that someone cared, that there was a way out. Frank retired from his retirement. He started consulting on domestic violence cases, offering his expertise to prosecutors and police departments for free. He became a fixture at the courthouse, the old military guy who showed up to every single child abuse case and sat in the gallery like a silent guardian. Defense lawyers hated him. Victims' advocates loved him. He didn't care either way. He just kept showing up. On my 25th birthday, Frank gave me a gift. An envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. Frank, I can't. It's from Emily's life insurance, he said quietly. I've been saving it, investing it, letting it grow. I always meant to use it for something that mattered, something that would have made her proud. But this is yours. It's mine to give. And I want you to use it to start a foundation, a place where kids like you, kids like Emily, can find help. Real help. Not just prayers and thoughts, but resources, lawyers, counseling, safe houses, everything they need to escape and rebuild. I stared at the check, then at Frank. This man who'd taken me in when I had nothing, who'd fought for me when no one else would, who'd become the family I needed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do it. Say you'll build something that lasts, something that saves lives. I will, I promise. The Emily Morrison Foundation opened 2 years later. We specialized in helping abused kids navigate the legal system, providing them with everything from lawyers to therapists to emergency housing. We worked with law enforcement, with schools, with anyone who might encounter a child in danger. And we saved kids, dozens of them, hundreds eventually. Every single one of them got what I got, a fighting chance, someone who believed them, someone who knew how to help. Frank was at the ribbon cutting, standing off to the side with his arms crossed and the smallest smile on his face. When reporters asked him about his involvement, he deflected to me, to the staff, to anyone but himself. But everyone knew. Everyone understood that without Frank Morrison, none of this would exist. When he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, the funeral was packed. Prosecutors and judges, police officers and FBI agents, social workers and lawyers and kids, so many kids, teenagers and young adults who'd been helped by Frank at some point, who'd been saved by his expertise and his refusal to let abusers win. I gave the eulogy. Frank Morrison never set out to be a hero, I said, looking out at the sea of faces. He was just a soldier doing his job, an investigator following the evidence, a father who lost his daughter and decided to spend the rest of his life making sure other fathers didn't have to bury their children. I had to pause, collecting myself. He saved my life, not just from physical danger, but from despair, from the belief that nobody cared, that the system didn't work, that I was alone. He showed me that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, that sometimes the guy who looks like just another old man sitting on a bench is actually the most powerful ally you could ask for. Frank used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they survive, but what they build after they survive. He built a legacy of justice, of protection, of kids who grew up to be adults because someone cared enough to fight for them. I'm one of those kids, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other kids get the same chance I got, the same chance Frank gave me. They buried him with full military honors. The flag folding, the 21-gun salute, the presentation of the flag to his next of kin, to me, because somewhere along the way, Frank had updated his will, made me his heir, not just to his property or his money, but to his legacy. The house became a satellite office for the foundation. His car went to a kid who'd just aged out of foster care and needed reliable transportation. His military medals went to a museum that honored veterans. But his mission, his absolute refusal to let kids suffer without someone fighting for them, that became mine. I'm 43 now, director of the Emily Morrison Foundation, which operates in 12 states and has helped over 3,000 kids escape abusive situations. We have lawyers on staff, therapists, caseworkers. We work with law enforcement to train them on recognizing abuse. We lobby for better laws, better protections, and we win. Not every case, not every time, but enough to matter. My mother and I reconciled eventually. It took years of therapy and hard conversations and me learning to separate the woman she'd been, trapped and terrified, from the choices she'd made. She volunteers at the foundation. Now, working with mothers who are trying to escape abusive partners, using her own story to show them it's possible. It's not the relationship we had when I was a kid, but it's something. And maybe that's enough. I still have nightmares sometimes, still have moments where I see a man who looks like Marcus and my heart starts racing. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you get justice, but I have tools now, therapy and medication and coping strategies, and I have purpose. Every kid I help is proof that Marcus didn't win. Every successful case is proof that abusers don't get the final word, that their victims can survive and thrive and build beautiful things out of the ashes of their trauma. Last week, a 16-year-old kid came into our office. He'd been beaten by his stepfather, had run away, was terrified and alone, and convinced nobody would help him. I sat down across from him, looked at his black eyes and split lip, and said the same thing Frank had said to me all those years ago. You're safe now. Whatever you're running from, you're safe right here. And I meant it. Because I have resources, I have contacts, I have an entire foundation built on the principle that no child should face abuse alone. That kid is safe now, living with a foster family who actually gives a damn. His stepfather is in jail awaiting trial, and the kid is in therapy, starting to heal, beginning to believe he might have a future, just like I did. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate, if I think it was meant to be that I stumbled into that gas station parking lot, that Frank happened to be sitting there, that our paths crossed at the exact moment I needed him most. I don't know about fate, but I know about choice. Frank chose to sit on that bench night after night for 5 years, waiting to be useful again. He chose to help me, chose to use his skills and connections to fight for a scared kid he'd never met before, chose to become a father to someone else's son because his own daughter was gone. And I'm choosing to honor that every single day. With every kid I help, every case I take, every battle I fight against a system that too often fails the most vulnerable. Frank Morrison taught me that the world is full of predators, but it's also full of protectors. People who see someone in trouble and decide to do something about it. People who refuse to look away, refuse to make excuses, refuse to let evil win just because it's easier than fighting. I'm one of those people now. And so are the lawyers and therapists and caseworkers and volunteers who make up the foundation. We're Frank's army, continuing the war he started, fighting for kids who can't fight for themselves. Sometimes I look at the photo I keep on my desk, me and Frank at my college graduation, both of us grinning like idiots, and I imagine what he'd say if he could see what the foundation has become. Probably something like, "Looks good, son. Now let's save a few more." Because for Frank, it was never about glory or recognition. It was about the work, the mission, the absolute conviction that kids deserve protection and abusers deserved consequences. I carry that conviction with me every day in every case, and whenever I feel tired, whenever the system frustrates me, whenever I want to give up because it feels like we're fighting an endless battle against an ocean of abuse and neglect and institutional failure, I remember that night. I remember stumbling into a gas station parking lot, bleeding and broken and convinced I was completely alone. I remember an old man on a bench who looked like he couldn't help anyone. And I remember learning that sometimes the most powerful warriors are the ones nobody sees coming. Frank Morrison wasn't just a hero. He was proof that one person who gives a damn can change everything. He changed everything for me. And now I'm changing everything for kids like I used to be. That's his legacy. Dad, that's what he built from the ashes of his daughter's death. And my trauma and every case he ever worked, he built hope. And hope, I've learned, is the most powerful weapon we have against the darkness. So yeah, I'm Jason Chen. I survived a monster. I found a guardian angel disguised as an old man on a bench. And I turned my pain into purpose. Some people ask me if I ever wanted revenge beyond what the courts gave me. The answer is no. Because here's what I learned from Frank. Real revenge isn't about making your abuser suffer. It's about making sure they become irrelevant. It's about building a life so full of purpose and meaning that they become nothing more than a footnote in your story. Marcus Williams was a chapter in my life. A brutal, painful chapter that shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. But he doesn't get to be the whole book. He doesn't get to define who I became. Frank Morrison does, the kids I've helped do, the families we've reunited, the abusers we've stopped, the laws we've changed. That's what defines me now. Last month, we got a call from a school counselor in Tennessee. A 12-year-old girl being abused by her mother's boyfriend. Same story, different faces. The counselor had found our website, seen our success rate, and reached out. We flew a lawyer down there within 24 hours, had the girl in protective custody within 48. The boyfriend was arrested within 72. And the mother, like my mother before her, had to make a choice. She chose her daughter, got herself into therapy, got a restraining order, started rebuilding. The girl is safe now, living with her grandmother while her mom gets help. She's in therapy, doing better in school, starting to smile again. When I got the update, I sat in Frank's old chair, the one I'd inherited along with his house, and I let myself cry. Happy tears this time, grateful tears, because that girl will never know what I know. She'll never understand what it feels like to be 16 and bleeding in a gas station parking lot with nowhere to go. She'll never experience that particular flavor of despair. And that's the whole point. Frank used to say that the goal wasn't just to save kids, but to save them early enough that they didn't have to hit rock bottom first, to catch them before they shattered, not just help them pick up the pieces afterward. We don't always succeed. Sometimes we get the call too late. Sometimes the system fails despite our best efforts. Sometimes kids slip through the cracks, no matter how hard we try to catch them. Those cases haunt me, keep me up at night, make me question if we're doing enough, if we could have done more, if there was something we missed. But then I think about the 3,000 kids we have saved, the ones who are alive and healing and building futures because someone intervened, because someone gave a damn, because we were there when they needed us. 3,000 kids who didn't become statistics, who didn't end up like Frank's daughter, Emily, who got a fighting chance. That's not nothing. That's everything. I got a letter last year from a kid we'd helped 5 years ago. He's 21 now, in college, studying to be a social worker. He wrote to thank me, to tell me he was paying it forward, that he wanted to help kids the way we'd helped him. "You gave me my life back," he wrote. "Now I want to give that gift to someone else." I keep that letter in my desk drawer, pull it out on bad days when I need to remember why we do this work, why we keep fighting even when it feels impossible. Because every kid we save might become another Frank Morrison, might become another person who dedicates their life to protecting the vulnerable, might become another link in an unbroken chain of people who refuse to let evil win. That's the real revenge against people like Marcus. Not making them suffer, though prison certainly accomplished that, but making their impact irrelevant by saving so many kids that their individual cruelty becomes a drop in an ocean of healing. I think about parallel universes sometimes, about what would have happened if I hadn't run that night, if I'd stayed home, tried to tough it out, convince myself it wasn't that bad. Um, in those universes, I'm probably dead, or so broken I might as well be. Um, Marcus would have kept escalating. The violence would have gotten worse. Eventually, something would have given. But I did run, and I did stumble into that parking lot, and Frank was there. Like, he'd been there every night for 5 years, waiting to be needed. I've stopped trying to label it. All I know is that I'm grateful. Every single day, I'm grateful that in this universe, in this timeline, I found help when I needed it most. And I'm determined to be that help for someone else. To be the Frank Morrison sitting on the bench when a scared kid stumbles into the parking lot. To be the person who sees someone in trouble and decides that's their problem now, their mission, their purpose. My therapist says I have a savior. Complex, maybe I do, but if spending my life trying to save kids from abusers is a complex, it's one I'm happy to have. The foundation is expanding again. We're opening offices in 3 new states this year, training more lawyers, hiring more therapists, building more safe houses. Every expansion means more kids we can reach, more lives we can change. We're also working on a new initiative, teaching self-defense and awareness to at-risk youth. Not just physical self-defense, but emotional and legal self-defense. How to recognize the warning signs of abuse, how to document evidence, how to access help, how to use the system instead of being used by it. Frank would have loved this program. He always believed that knowledge was power, that teaching kids to protect themselves was just as important as protecting them ourselves. I wish he could see it. Wish I could call him up and tell him about the latest case, the newest victory, the kid who just got placed in a safe home. Wish I could hear him say, "Good work, son," one more time. But he's gone. Has been for almost 10 years now. And I've had to learn to carry on his mission without his guidance. Turns out he prepared me better than I realized. All those late night conversations about cases, all those lessons about the legal system, all those times he made me think through problems instead of just giving me answers. He was training me, preparing me to take over when he couldn't be there anymore. Smart old bastard. Planned it all out and never said a word. My office at the foundation has his military flag on the wall, the one they gave me at his funeral, and his nameplate from when he was a lieutenant colonel, and a photo of him and Emily from before she died when they were both smiling and the world still made sense. I look at that photo sometimes and imagine what he'd say to her if he could see her now, see what her death became, see how her legacy lives on in every kid we save. I think he'd tell her he's sorry, that he couldn't save her, that he failed her when she needed him most. And I think she'd tell him what I wish I could tell him, that he didn't fail, that what he built after her death saved thousands of lives, that she'd be proud of him, that she'd be proud of us. I'm 43 years old. I've been doing this work for over 2 decades. And I'm tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, that comes from carrying other people's trauma day after day, year after year. But I'm not stopping, can't stop. Because every time I think about slowing down, about taking it easier, about letting someone else carry the weight, I remember that 16-year-old kid bleeding in a parking lot. I remember being absolutely certain that nobody cared, that nobody would help, that I was completely and utterly alone. And I remember being wrong. As long as there are kids out there who feel that way, who believe they're alone, who think nobody will fight for them, I have to keep working. Have to keep building, have to keep being the proof that they're wrong, because that's what Frank taught me. That's what his life and Emily's death showed me. One person can make a difference. One person who decides to give a damn, who refuses to look away, who chooses to fight even when it's hard. Frank Morrison was that person for me, and now I'm that person for thousands of kids, and those kids will grow up and be that person for thousands more. That's how we win. Not by destroying the abusers, though we do that too, but by creating an ever-expanding network of protectors, of people who refuse to let kids suffer alone, of warriors who fight with evidence and law and unwavering determination. That's Frank's real legacy. Not the cases he won or the criminals he caught, but the ripple effect he started, the wave of protection and justice that keeps spreading, keeps growing, keeps saving lives. I'm part of that wave, and I'll ride it until the day I die because I'm Jason Chen. I survived Marcus Williams. I was saved by Frank Morrison. And I've spent my adult life making sure that every kid who needs saving finds their own Frank, finds someone who will fight for them when they can't fight for themselves. That's my story. That's my purpose. That's my revenge. Not against Marcus, against the world that created him, against the systems that failed to protect me, against the silence and shame that let abuse thrive in darkness. My revenge is light, is truth, is safety, is 3,000 kids who are alive and healing because we refuse to let them face their monsters alone. My revenge is the Emily Morrison Foundation, operating in 12 states and growing every year. My revenge is every abuser sitting in a prison cell because we built an airtight case against them. My revenge is every kid who will never know the despair I felt because we caught them before they fell. That's what Frank taught me, that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Building something so good, so powerful, so enduring that the darkness becomes irrelevant. And we're building it every day, one case at a time, one kid at a time, one life at a time. Frank Morrison started this war, and I'm going to keep fighting it until my last breath. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a kid who's being hurt, who's scared, who thinks nobody cares, and I need them to know you're wrong. Someone cares. Someone will fight for you. Someone will be your Frank Morrison if you just hold on long enough to find them. This is my promise, my mission, my life's work. This is how a scared, broken 16-year-old boy became a warrior. This is how an old man on a bench changed the world. This is how we turn pain into purpose, trauma into triumph, and victims into survivors. This is what revenge looks like when it's done right. And I'm just getting started.